But welcome everybody. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button.
I remember in middle school when you felt self-conscious if you were the last one to go through puberty. That really went topsy-turvy, didn't it?
Sometimes the Hasbara, it's too much explaining yourself and it's too apologetic.
Be sure to hit the notifications bell.
I actually do believe Israel won't just bomb countless civilians.
Be sure to tweet this out. Be sure to put this up on your Facebook.
You have to be kind to people. Being kind is the guys in this place in the first place.
Put this up on your Reddit.
Chile is a country.
Be sure to cut and paste, a link to this to go into your favorite Facebook chat group.
It's good to see so many normal people in here.
Now, spanking isn't just my deep, dark personal secret. It's America's deep, dark secret.
I've never seen it explained so simply anywhere.
Put this on WhatsApp. Put this on Telegram. Put this on your favorite messenger app.
Hello and welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel. I'm your host, an Untitled Anarchist Seagull called Elise. And wow, it's been a fucking week, hasn't it? I probably would do better numbers if I didn't swear this early in the stream, and yet I cannot not, because just the amount of shit that's just constantly going on. I mean, I have to say, LA's been holding it down. I haven't seen anything because I've been streaming for most of the day from LA today, but I mean, they've just done an amazing job just absolutely humiliating ICE, and that has been going on across the country, like even in places you wouldn't expect, like Omaha, are forcing ICE to reconsider their positions. And of course, Israel and the U.S. have decided to just start an all-out war with Iran. I can't really not mention that. And since object permanence is the worst enemy of the propaganda system, well, at least one of the worst enemies, it's worth remembering certain things, because we're bound to hear all sorts of shit, we always do, about how Iran is a madman regime and all this sort of thing. How they're just crazy. All sorts of racist and ableist and very orientalist bullshit that is meant to make us think that they're erratic and unpredictable and belligerent, and as if they were the ones who were doing all of the threatening and attacking in the Middle East and not, say, the U.S. And here's a thing we absolutely should remember, because I don't think that we're going to see a lot of, like, Western media outlets, certainly not in the U.S., pointing this out. But if anyone in these long 20 months of genocide in Gaza has been actually really committed to de-escalating things, to avoiding turning this into some sort of major regional war, or possibly something bigger than that, it has been Iran. That is just a fact. I mean, let's just look, since it's often, the chronology is often reversed on these things, let's just remember, Israel attacked Iran back in 2024. They attacked, it was in a fractally illegal operation. It was illegal on multiple levels. They attacked the Iranian consulate in Damascus. And Iran's response was first to go to the Security Council, send them a letter, and say, we want to give you, like, I think it was a week's time to deal with this issue and respond appropriately. And if you do, we will consider the matter closed. And if you don't, then we will have to take action. Because obviously, especially with the way Israel and the U.S. are acting at the moment, you can't just take that, or they'll just start doing more and more. And so the Security Council, with the U.S. veto, did not do shit. And so Iran had an operation that they called True Promise 1, which was extremely limited, I mean, it's been described as mostly an intelligence gathering operation to see what the U.S. and Israel would do in response. And in that sense, you could say it was quite successful. But, yeah, all they did, they fired mostly extremely cheap drones that were designed to just be destroyed. And they landed a few shots on Israeli military bases, and then they said they'd consider it closed. And then Israel, since Israel feels entitled not just to be the aggressor, but also to act aggrieved when the consequences of their actions show up around, come around to bite them, said that they had to respond. And so they responded, and their response was, actually they had an attack on Tehran. Mostly it was a failure, but they did assassinate, among other things, Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of the political bureau of Hamas and the elected prime minister of the occupied Palestinian territory, to the extent that anyone can claim the office. Although, since Israel and the U.S. haven't allowed elections since 2006, I mean, it's not really clear whether anyone can claim the office, but he was the last person to have been elected to it. And Iran responded with, again, first of all, a letter to the Security Council saying, deal with this, and we'll consider it over. But if you don't, we'll have to take matters into our own hands. And they did. And again, it was an extremely limited, one-off operation targeting very specific military targets. There were basically no casualties. That time there was exactly one civilian casualty, and that was the result of the puppet Air Force of Jordan shooting down one of Iran's missiles over the occupied West Bank, and it killed a Palestinian from Gaza, apparently, there. But if it had been allowed to actually go to its target, it would not have hit that. It would have not have done that. But in any case, and then Iran said, we consider this closed. And Israel actually carried out more attacks after that, and they said, we will respond at a time and place of our choosing, which has become like a meme amongst politicians in the U.S. Ever since Iran said that, now all sorts of politicians in the U.S. say it, often very pathetically, like when Hakeem Jeffries says that in response to a senator being just illegally arrested for asking a question at a press conference. And then they didn't really do anything. They said for a while, the wait is going to be part of the punishment, but then they didn't really do much. They decided, and in parallel to that, they did enter into continued discussions with the U.S. In fact, appeasing the U.S., trying to reach some sort of agreement with the U.S., despite the U.S. not really respecting the agreements that it signs, and the fact that the U.S. was demanding things that Iran had absolutely no obligation to give, and that the U.S. had no right to demand. They were very much the de-escalating factor compared to an extremely aggressive and just utterly out of control U.S.-Israel duo, who really do seem to be just trying to find out what they have to do in order to trigger a full-on regional war. And now it looks like they, at the very least, they know what they need to do to trigger a full-on response from Iran. I've been trying to keep tabs on that to the extent that military censorship in Israel permits, because they don't want the general public there to realize the extent of the damage and the places that are being targeted, because at a certain point, they might say that this actually starting a war with Iran might be a bad idea, and they don't want that. But, yeah, so at the same time, this is just another chapter in this sort of just self-destruction of Israel, because this isn't going to help them in the long run, no matter what domestic political conflicts it helps them paper over in the short run. But, that's a big part of this week anyway. There was a bunch of shit going on. But I was thinking, you know, when you see these sorts of just geopolitical like disasters going on, you want to hear from somebody who can help you out, to help you understand it. Somebody who has a plan to defeat imperialism. I'm rather happy with that intro. I mean, yeah, not the computer, the animation that I did there. Well, I'm happy with that too. But I feel like that was a really good introduction that I just gave. I'm very happy. I'm very happy with that, how that came out, and I'm apparently getting rather good at this whole talking into a microphone thing. Hello, River Rune. So yes, we have from Caleb Muppet of the Creepy Pricks International. Defeat imperialism. We have a plan, ellipsis. So he's like the Baldric of Nazbolery.
I never met...
We're gonna get to hear about his cunning plan to defeat imperialism. Wait a second, this fucking video is 9 hours long. Apparently, the way they're going to defeat imperialism is by overloading their SSDs with long-ass videos.
Sam Marcy, the founder of the Workers' World Party. I never met him. He died in 1998 when I was, like, 11 years old.
It is so weird when I hear that, because there's something about him that I assume, just the entire way he presents himself, I kind of assumed that he's going to be my age or older, and then he says he was like 11 in 1998, and it's like, holy shit! Like, how did that work? Like, did you time travel? Is this Flight of the Navigator, Nazbol?
But because I was in the Workers' World Party for 8
years. Wow. I don't know why. I don't know. Well, we know he has kind of a humiliation kink going on, and that is the only explanation I have for why he wants people to see this video. This is the video, okay, in that cringe cartoon he did to introduce the CPI years ago. Yeah, he said, you know, he roused a crowd with a speech on the theme of class against class. And if you actually watch this video, which we have on stream, you can go to his channel and it's there. You find that nobody's paying attention to him. He's just standing. I assumed, because they had these general assemblies in Occupy, which is what this was about, which is what was going on here, Occupy Wall Street, that he was addressing one of these general assemblies, as people did. And no, he's just standing in the road, and everybody else is talking on their phone and not paying him the slightest attention. And even when he goes into a call and response chant of class against class, nobody joins in. And look at his fucking haircut as well. Like, seriously, if I were him, I would bury this thing. I would, like, get super injunctions just to prevent people showing this thing.
years. From the time I was 19 to the time I was about 27. I feel like I absorbed, maybe secondhand or third hand, a lot of Sam Marcy's teachings.
Like, so this is the Caleb Maupin B-roll we're getting here. Wow. I've never seen anyone wear long hair so badly.
One story, or not even really story, but quotation.
Sam Marcy looks vaguely like the Heaven's Gate guy.
Or anecdote.
I never noticed that
Sam
before.
Marcy, the founder of the Workers' World Party, would tell his followers about, and used in many, many different speeches and lectures. was repeated to me on many, many occasions.
See, the wild thing here is I'm realizing, I assumed when I saw 9 hours, 20 minutes, and 31 seconds in this fucking video, that this meant that there was no editing at all. But you don't get this without editing. He did edit this. And it came out to 9 hours, 20 minutes, and 31 seconds. I have trouble getting YouTube to accept it when I upload a 45-minute video.
So Sam Marcy would talk about at the big anti-war protests. Back in the 1960s, there would be these big protests against the Vietnam War. Hundreds of thousands of people would march against the Vietnam War. All the communist groups would bring out their people. There would be, marching bands and all kinds of things. There was one group of people that were at every big anti-war protest. Every big anti-war protest, you would see these puppets. These big puppets that people would make. And they were very big and elaborate.
Yeah. I mean, and not just in the 60s. I mean, if anything, I feel like there was more of that later. I remember that starting to be a really big thing around the globalization protests.
Puppets of Richard Nixon, the greedy capitalists sending people to war. They'd be puppets of Lyndon Johnson. They'd be,
it looks like a fucking potato.
Puppets of the heroic Vietnamese people fighting for their liberation from imperialism. They'd be, they did these kind of well-made, giant art projects, I guess you could call them. And it would take a lot of people
because that's what they are.
These puppets were not small endeavors. But these people that were against the Vietnam War, for whatever reason, they would get together and they would decide what puppets they were going to make. And they would, as a group, make these
Maybe
puppets.
you could I wonder if you could look at their placards and the statements of the organizations they were part of. Since obviously an organization was involved in making something like this. And find out what reason they were against the war on Vietnam.
As a group, come to the anti-war protest with these very elaborate puppets that they made and march through the streets.
That's not a puppet. That's a woman sitting on a guy's back. Oh, there were puppets behind her.
They're puppets. That's what they did. And these people, again, they were not in any communist organization. They must have been in some, clearly that was an organized effort, not just the making of it, but even carrying that and making sure it stays standing up and everything. Clearly an organization of some kind was involved in it. And I'm pretty sure it would have had a name. Out a specific interpretation of leftist ideology. They were against the Vietnam War for whatever reason. They were particularly artistic, creative people. They wanted to make a contribution. They wanted to make a contribution of some kind. And
oh well, wait, we have ANCOM flags there. I wonder if they might have just been ANCOMs. Look, in the middle of the screen there, right behind that big placard that's kind of blurry, there are red and black ANCOM flags. So maybe that's why they were against the war on Vietnam.
Because they wanted to make a contribution.
Yeah, you can get a better look at them now.
Because of the fact that they were artistically inclined, they would make these puppets. And it was like a little community that existed, and there were different puppets. There were different communities.
Wow, does he not know what that flag is? Because I have a feeling that he would not be showing that flag. Because, it looks actually, just judging from the layout, like maybe the puppet people were with the ANCOMs?
People that would do this. And there were people that, they fell in love and got married to people who they made puppets with. There were people
what's your fucking point?
Single at the time that they started making puppets.
So, what his plan to defeat imperialism is, what, to get married to puppet makers?
4 years later, they were making puppets with, with their little infant baby that they had just had.
As opposed to what, a non-infant baby?
And it was just this whole subculture of people that had made it their commitment, in opposition to the Vietnam War, they were going to make these puppets that would be displayed at anti-war protests.
It's still better than the CPI's merch.
And from what I heard, again, the way this story was told back to me, Sam Marcy, the founder of the Workers' World Party, would always talk about these puppet-making people. And he would talk about how valuable that was. That these people, who were not communists, they were movement people.
Well, I mean, first of all, we are taking Sam Marcy and Caleb Maupin's word for who is and is not communists. And let me just say, I don't think anyone in chat has any illusions on this, but just in case, I wouldn't take his view on what is or is not a rainy day. Okay? And I just can't help noticing that the footage, the archival footage he's using of these puppets, show them very closely followed by anarcho-communist flags. So I'm going to say there was a fair chance maybe they were communists.
Right? They were part of the movement. And they built a community. And they...
Oh, wait a second. This is not anti-Vietnam footage at all. Let me pull that back a second, because I think I saw Stop the Iraq War.
That these people, who were not communists, they were movement people. Right? They were part...
Stop the Iraq War. This is not... Okay. Okay, so this is not... I was gonna say, I feel like if there had been a whole bunch of full-color footage of red and black flags at anti-Vietnam War protests in the U.S. in the 60s and 70s, I feel like we would see that a lot more than we do.
Of the movement, and they built a community, and they'd found a task that they could take on to advance the struggle for justice, to make the puppets for the anti-war protests. It was a form of artistic expression. It was a form of community. And they came together and they made these puppets, and they were friends with each other, and they had relationships. And I'm sure there were arguments about these puppets. There were rivalries.
And they made dinner with each other, and they ate that dinner, and then they did the washing up. Like, I'm beginning to see how this ends up being a 9-hour, 20-minute, and 31-second video. If he's going to spend this long on the concept of people who combined making puppets, going to anti-war marches, and having relationships with each other, which is like literally all he said 3 times. Oh, also he said they're not communists, though we only have his and fucking Marcy's word on that.
Puppet group was against another puppet group. These things happen, but they found a task, they took on a task, they made a community around it, and that was valuable. And in a way...
that's the other thing he said like 10 times, is that Sam Marcy said it was valuable. And since he does not like Sam Marcy, I'm guessing he's about to say it is not valuable, having the art, the community, all the other things he's no good at.
Every one of these puppet-making people
PMPs
is 1,000 times more valuable than some teenage kid who thinks he's Lenin, than some, know-it-all, Marxist guy who thinks he's the next Lenin.
Oh, I see. Yes, I can see now why Caleb Muppet is going to be... that nickname has never been more appropriate than it is right now, I should say. I'm beginning to see why he does not like Marcy.
Great leader, he knows, he understands all the Marxism, and he can out-debate you, and all of that, because those guys who think they understand Marxism and no one can teach them anything, they know it all, and all of that, they're gone after a year or two. After a year or two, they get bored. They find a new hobby. They realize they're not.
Okay, now we've got
their
actual Vietnam
and become
footage.
the next great leader of the revolution.
He's talking about himself right now. He was in the Workers' World Party. He thought he knew it all because he read like 2 pages of Marx and maybe 1 book of Lenin's. He was gone pretty quickly and decided to declare himself the next great leader of of a cult. Marcy's talking about him.
Move on. However, those puppet people, they're still there. They're still there, those puppet-making people.
PMPs.
Because for them, it's not a fantasy. It's not an intellectual...
Yeah, they're PMPs. They're permanent movement puppet-making people.
Exercise. It's not a word game. It's about the fact that they, 1, believe in stopping the war. 2, they've found a way to do something, to make their actual contribution to stopping the war. And number 3, they've built real relationships and friendships around making that contribution.
And I have to say, okay, if this is what Marcy said, this would be an example of a thing Marcy said that I actually think is, that he's got pretty much right. I have this idea, I half-jokingly call it organizational promiscuity, where I sort of organizationally am half in, half out of all sorts of places. Less so at the moment because I'm in the middle of nowhere, and so I'm actually, there's one organization I'm in, and that's the IWW, but other than that, and let me just say, having said that, of course, this is not any kind of official IWW anything. My views do not necessarily reflect the unions. I was just using that as an example, but I think that you form relationships with people in these organizations. The organizations will come and go, and sometimes it's good that they go. They outlive their usefulness. They never actually really manage to do the thing, and then they start just doing the thing where they perpetuate their own existence without considering whether they're doing what they set out to do. But the relationships, if the relationships are there and the commitment to find ways to achieve the goals are there, then there will always be a platform from which to act. And I call that organizational polyamory, just half-jokingly, and it's just something that I kind of came to kind of spontaneously, because fundamentally it is the relationships. People often forget the importance of capital as a social relation. The whole edifice of Marxist analysis of capitalism is very much relational. It is a way, capital isn't just a thing in abstraction, it is a way people relate to each other. And any struggle against it is going to involve changing the way people relate to each other, and forming relationships that have as a part of them, movement goals, whatever they are. I think is kind of part of that. I think it helps keep you in there if you have those sorts of connections.
They have people that they can rely on, that they can trust, that they like to work with. And because of that, they continue to make the puppets. And that is very, very valuable. And so when people talk about a movement, that's a movement. That's a movement.
The movement people
is a
making
group of people working together
to make puppets while having
because
relationships.
They believe in something. That is a movement. Now, I don't particularly, if you look at what people do now, this commodified identity, where you're really by yourself. You're showing off on social media that you went to the protest, you're consuming certain social media content, you're consuming certain books, you're making statuses. You're not.
He says this as a guy whose entire existence is on social media, producing certain books that people inexplicably consume and getting people to share the link to this in their chat groups and their WhatsApp groups.
Really connecting with anybody. You know, you're not really building something. You might go to the protest and break shit every so often, but you're not really building anything. That's not a movement. The building blocks of what they called the movement was communities. And the communist...
What, you think that the people who are, like, I mean, the reason, like, you think that, say, the people who are, like, barricading streets in LA aren't in community? I mean, is that what he's coming... I mean, he recorded this before he would have had that example. So he's not talking about that. But the thing is, the reason that what's happened in LA, what's, as far as I know, still going on in LA, though if anyone knows better, please, Chad, tell me. I just haven't had a chance to really check in because I've been, like, focused on what's going on with, like, Israel and Iran to the extent that I've had a chance to look. But the reason that kind of resistance is possible is because of communities. Communities made that happen. Communities are forming around it happening. The idea that just, there's this, like, liberal nonsense that tries to treat anything that, like, breaks something or whatever, or causes some, or throws, the urban landscape into some kind of disarray as just senseless destruction. But it's nonsense. If you're there, if you actually see what's going on, you can often see exactly what the sense of it was. Like, you pull a fucking skip out into the street so that it's harder to charge you. Fires help, counteract tear gas. They make it harder for the riot pigs to aim. All these sorts of things. There is sense in all of it.
We're a big part of that, no doubt. I mean, the Workers' World Party, the Communist Party, the Socialist Workers' Party, the Revolutionary Union, the October League, these groups were a big part of it. Yes, they were a big part of it, but it was the communities and the networks of people who trusted each other, who knew each other, who relied on each other. That was what made the movement.
Notice that what made the movement was not a creepy fucker from Northern Ohio who likes to manipulate his cult members into paddling him. That is not what made the community.
Ideas are great.
What the fuck just happened?
But the reason that the Center for Political Innovation exists is to put on events like this, to give a platform to ideas.
I have to say, John Brown looks quite unimpressed, and I can understand. Fred Hampton's wondering what the fuck he's doing here with these two big-ass American flags.
People about anti-imperialism and socialism. And that is why it is really an honor tonight to bring forward our guest of honor, a real hero, someone who deserves to be heard from the heavens. Everyone should hear what this man has to say. Scott Ritter is here.
Oh, did he say hero or pedo? I think he said hero, but I mean, I think he must have meant pedo.
Scott Ritter is here. We are proud that Scott...
Is this his plan? I don't want to know what fucking puppets that Scott Ritter would be making. Let's just be clear. We don't... Let's please... He's not going to have a puppet making session after this. Like, when are we going to have the plan to defeat imperialism? And how many creepy nonce fuckers are involved in it? Jesus.
Ritter is here. This is a hero. This is a hero right here.
Wait a second. What exactly makes him a hero? He was a weapons inspector, and he said what he found, and pointed out that it was a lie. That was a long time ago. And he was not the only weapons inspector to do it. Lots of weapons inspectors in Iraq pointed out that what the U.S. government was saying was complete bullshit and completely inconsistent with their findings on the ground. There's nothing special about him, except that he's had, like, multiple different child pornography convictions.
Love you, Scott. We love you. Go ahead and give us some words.
Any particular ones?
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. To be honest, I thought I was just coming here to a reception to say hi to people, and speaking is, hopefully it's a bonus.
No.
You know, listening, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me, Caleb. It's an honor and privilege to be here, and I want to thank everybody here for coming out. I know some people traveled a long way to come to this rally, and
I don't know if you can actually call it a rally when it fits in a Motel 6 conference room. Is he okay? So, but Scott Ritter, he's got the plan to defeat imperialism, which is really kind of surprising since last I heard from him, he didn't actually have an objection even to, like, U.S. imperialism. We'll leave aside any questions about, like, non-U.S. imperialism for a second and just focus on U.S. imperialism. I have never had the impression that this guy had any objection to it. He was a willing participant in it.
Journeys begin one step at a time, and we're on a great journey. And today was the first step. And you know, the people
they begin with a single step.
And when you take the next step, they're 2 steps behind us. So you guys are the winners, and they got issues. And
I wonder, it's really great that Scott Ritter hasn't got any issues.
I applaud you. So again, thanks for coming out. Now, they say some of the best journeys, you bring about some of the most interesting travel companions.
Man.
And I have to say right now, listening to
I'm just glad he didn't say fucking bedfellows.
Talk and everything.
Jesus.
You guys are some interesting traveling companions.
I remember Sinjata, you remember Black Anarchic Reacts, who I haven't, he like either privated or deleted his channel, which was really, I mean, it was a shame. He's had some great stuff on there. But he actually, at some point, was riffing on the term fellow traveler when talking about Caleb and Scott Ritter, and came up with calling them pedo-travelers. And that is just something, that is a fond memory of Sinjata. I hope he's doing great.
Any more interesting travel companions than you for somebody like me?
I mean, that's, what does he mean for somebody like him? Why are they interesting travel companions for someone like him? I don't want to. Well,
you know, when I grew up, my father was a career Air Force officer, and I call myself a child of the cold.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Both things can be true. It can be true that the reason that they suddenly decided to take an interest in whatever material he had on his hard drive was that he had spoken out. And that doesn't mean he's innocent. I mean, one thing I've never actually heard, I don't remember there ever being a Scott Ritter is innocent campaign. I don't think even Scott Ritter claims he's innocent. Yeah, I mean, it's a pity. He had some really great streams. I learned a lot from him. I hope he comes back. I know he was talking about going to Africa, possibly, I think, to Ethiopia. And I just hope he's doing well.
War. And back then, terms like kill a commie for mommy were real. Better dead than red was real.
Well, I mean, those terms still are real to the extent that a term is real.
It was part of my life, 24/7. Because that's the life we lived. We were on the front lines of the Cold War. Across the frontier was the Soviet enemy, and we were ready to go to war. Not just any war, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, wow, this guy, so he's got a plan to defeat imperialism, does he?
War that would bring about the end of all mankind, because that war would include nuclear weapons. That was the harsh reality of my youth. And sadly, I was ready and willing to go on the same journey that my father did.
What journey did it?
I enlisted in the Army out of high school. I ended up getting a commission in the United States Marine Corps. And my focus of studies in college was Russian area studies. Why? To know your enemy.
Okay. Like, where is this going? This is going to be a random compilation of crap. I'm fairly certain of that. Like 9 hours. What the fuck? Like 9-hour video. Is it going to be just 9 hours of just random speeches?
Why? To kill my enemy. I'm just being straight up honest with you. I joined the Marine Corps to kill commies. I joined the Marine Corps to kill Soviets. That's all I wanted to do because I believed that was the mission given to me by my country, by my heritage, by my legacy, to defend America.
The less we talk about his legacy, the better.
Freedom, our way of
life.
life.
And here's the thing. This is a thing that happens sometimes. Like, people will sometimes come forward with really, insiders will come forward with really important sort of disclosures and revelations. And some more opportunistic organizations will immediately, treat them as some sort of movement leaders. That makes, that suddenly means that they're comrades. But the thing is, they're sources. He was a source of information that actually was available from a lot of people. I mean, I remember reading in Der Spiegel at the time, there was an interview with one of the German weapons inspectors who had just gotten back from Iraq before the war, and he was talking about, and the headline was "Pure Stimmungsmache," like pure cheap propaganda. Which is his term for describing the U.S. claims of weapons of mass destruction, because they had not found any sign of them, of anything. And there were tons of weapons inspectors coming back and giving the exact same report that Ritter gave. That doesn't. I mean, sometimes you'll have somebody who will come forward about something like this, and they're on side on a very specific issue. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're a comrade. Maybe they become one. Maybe they are one. Maybe they've secretly been on side with a lot more than that for a very long time, and this is them sort of, they're like communist egg cracking or something like that. So Scott Ritter did a rather valuable thing that took a certain amount of risk on his part a long time ago. And he's been sort of building a career on that amongst people who don't find it at all problematic that he's, was repeatedly convicted of possessing fucking CSA material.
Against an evil scourge that I didn't understand, but I feared. So I was willing to kill them. And I did a hell of a job preparing for this operation. 2.5 years in 29 Palms, California, with a field artillery battalion whose job was to put steel on target. And I trained hard, and we were ready. If the balloon went up, we would have acquitted ourselves well.
Okay, is that... was that supposed to be a joke, or is the guy laughing at some random other thing?
Thank goodness the balloon didn't go up. Instead, they sent me on a different journey. They sent me to the Soviet Union. A guy who was training to kill Soviets suddenly was sent to the Soviet Union not to kill them, but to cooperate with them. On what? Eliminating the most dangerous weapons in the world. In December of 1987, Ronald Reagan sat down with Mikhail Gorbachev and signed the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. Intermediate nuclear forces are...
Okay, are we going to be talking about... I'm going to skip ahead and see what else we've got in here, because there is quite a lot of this.
Независимость нашей Родины
Да здравствует победоносная Красная Армия!
I believe this is Molotov's wait, why the fuck? Wait a second. This is, I'm pretty sure, Molotov's radio address announcing Germany had invaded the Soviet Union. Why the hell is this in here? Hey, let me back that up to be sure about that I'm identifying it correctly. But I'm fairly certain.
It's the same thing.
Вечная слава героям, павшим в боях за свободу и независимость нашей Родины.
Oh, I mean, he puts this in here, he doesn't even bother to translate it. What it says is all glory. Okay, this isn't that address because it's speaking in the past tense. All glory to those who fell in the battle for the independence and security of our motherland.
Да здравствует победоносная Красная Армия!
Long live the victorious Red Army. Well, like, this is just random crap.
И военно-морской флот.
And the Navy. Chicago Автопробег. They drive around Chicago on the anniversary of the victory day in the Soviet victory day in World War II. Like, okay. Where's the plan? Where's the plan to defeat imperialism, Caleb? I'm sure you have one. Is the plan that you're going to show them these fucking videos?
Some guests will say, I denounce terrorism, I'll oppose that. That's not enough. You must denounce Hamas. When they have an anti-racist activist or an activist against police brutality on Fox News, they'll say, do you denounce Black Lives Matter? Do you denounce the radicals and the Black Panthers? And they'll respond, of course we denounce.
Okay, I guess this is Vosh watching Caleb? Speaking of pedo travelers, like, what the fuck even is this? We're 43 minutes in there.
Violence. Of course we denounce law breaking. No, that's not good enough. Somebody in the black movement said something radical. We want you to denounce them. This tactic of demanding that people denounce other people in their movements is a tactic that the right wing has used against progressive forces and consistent.
Okay, skipping ahead.
If we were going to back down, we would have done it a long time ago. And if we were one of their plants or one of these fake anti-imperialists, it would be making it a lot easier for us. We have been facing...
Well, no, I mean, you don't make it very easy for yourselves.
A lot of challenges, but we continue to achieve great victories.
What victories? Are you going to tell us about the victories? When are we going to hear about your plan to defeat imperialism?
So we need your support. Please send us a contribution. Please be there on July 12th at the Midwest Convention Center in the Chicago.
Oh, that's right. Vosh managed to make Caleb look good. Vosh is one of the few people who have managed to make Caleb look knowledgeable and honest.
Thank you.
Okay. Hey, Badger. This is supposedly, at some point in this 9-hour and 20-minute video, we're going to hear about Caleb's plan to defeat imperialism. But before that, it's just a random collection of clips, not all of them even from the CPI. One was from, I think, Vyacheslav Molotov's, like, victory address at the end of World War II. Oh, wait. More fucking Scott Ritter.
To the masses! To the masses! To the masses!
Okay.
Not equal A.
Oh, okay, here we go. Oh, this is a scrapbook. This is the time he put pieces of paper on a dry erase board. I remember this.
A does not equal A. Now, what does that mean?
It means that there is no possible way that this first A could be the same as similar this A is. To this second A, there's going to be some kind of difference, because nothing in the universe is the same as anything else. The world is constantly in a state of change. Nothing in the universe is the same.
This dry erase board is not a dry erase board, which is why he's put pieces of paper on it.
All that exists in the universe is matter, but that matter is constantly in motion. Heraclitus was a famous philosopher of ancient Greece.
Wait, is this an ancient Greek philosopher cringing at this presentation? I think this is an ancient Greek philosopher depicted cringing at this presentation.
He said you never step into the same river twice. The world is constantly in a state of change, constantly in motion. And since our inception as a species...
Hello, Johannes Josef. I assume I'm pronouncing that correctly. Da gehe ich jedenfalls von aus. Fuck knows what we're looking at here. I thought we were going to hear Caleb Muppet tell us his plan to defeat imperialism, but instead it is the greatest hits of not very good presentations.
Human beings have been constantly struggling to make sense and survive and grow and change within this world that is...
I mean, yeah, I would say Caleb in particular struggles to make sense.
Constantly in motion.
He also struggles to get, like, video quality. Like, this video looks like some shit. The footage of him, I don't know what we're looking at here. Looks like something that somebody pulled off VHS from the 80s and cleaned the tracking lines up. Like,
We've done a pretty good job. We've taken dirt and rocks and we've turned it into iPhones and space travel and huge skyscraper buildings. We've engaged...
A skyscraper building? Like, that's a building that you put your skyscrapers in. Okay.
Compared to how long they lived thousands of years ago, it's a pretty massive difference. We've multiplied our population exponentially.
Like, maybe you could take some rocks and dirt and turn it into a working autofocus.
No other species has accomplished anything near what human beings have accomplished.
I mean, that is a hilarious line to be saying next to the proof that he hasn't worked out. Because this isn't the first time that he didn't know how to use a dry erase board. This is apparently a subsequent time when still he has not worked out that the way you use a dry erase board is you write on it. Humans have achieved so much. Wait a second, I realized I'm missing a page of my presentation. I gotta print it out so I can put it up on the dry erase board. Get these markers out of the way, will you?
And you cannot simply dismiss human beings as simply another animal. Frederick Engels, who was a close collaborator of Karl Marx, he differentiated human beings from other species this way. He said...
That is a very nostril-forward picture here from Olin Friedrich.
All the planned action of animals has never succeeded in impressing the stamp of their will upon the earth. That was left for man, ensuring it simply by its presence. But man makes his changes by making it serve his ends. He masters it. Because a banker...
Okay, now he's put up a piece of paper with the word imperialism on the dry erase board. So maybe this is where we get his plan to defeat imperialism. He has one. He definitely has one. We are 1 hour, 19 minutes, and 49 minutes into this fucking video. And I'm sure the plan is coming up. He's doing this to make sure it's really... You gotta make sure that you can't just share your plan to defeat imperialism with just anyone. Not just, you don't want to share your plan to defeat imperialism with some young guy who just thinks he's the next Lenin and he's going to leave your group in a few minutes. What you need is the permanent movement puppet-making people. Those are the people to share your plan to defeat imperialism with, because they form relationships, the permanent movement puppet making people.
Makes money through lending money. A factory owner makes money through selling products.
Yes. He's very much a believer in Schaffendes versus Raffendes Kapital, not at all fashy.
So a factory owner, he wants to pay his workers as little as possible, right? He, at the same time, he wants to sell as many products as possible. But a factory owner generally wants society to become wealthier.
What does that mean for society to become wealthier? Like, I mean, that is just a nonsense thing to say from any kind of materialist, like, class analysis, because a society, you know, capitalist society as a whole is not becoming wealthier. Certain parts of the society are becoming wealthier. And the factory owner, the capitalist, probably wants the bit of society that they're in to become wealthier. Ooh, we got link spam. You know, I always trust people who can to find me viewers whose entire marketing technique is to bomb other people's chats with just random crap. Like, a factory owner, I mean, leaving aside their, like, maybe they have personal feelings on the subject, but in terms of their class interest, which is what we're talking about, all they care about is that there's somebody who will pay them for their shit. And it doesn't really matter all that much who it is. Like, if you run a Rolex factory, you don't give a shit whether your workers can afford to buy the thing they made, because you get so much on that from the retail that it's making up for the fact that your workers could never pay for it.
Because the more prosperous people are, the more products you can sell.
Which people?
But a banker is very different. A banker simply wants to continue making money through lending money.
I mean, a factory worker also wants to continue making money. I mean, this is really... okay, I've never actually heard him do a Schaffendes und Raffendes Kapital so explicitly. Because he's trying to not just pretend that productive activity in capitalism does not inherently always occur in pursuit of financial assets, i.e. money. We'll leave aside that. I mean, this is one of the problems with treating finance capital as if it were like a completely different thing, as opposed to a use case for capital. But he's trying to make a moral distinction here, which is even bigger nonsense, because the factory owner doesn't give a shit. Like, I mean, let's talk. I mean, I want to hear him like use examples here. Like, I'm watching this series that I found on British Netflix called The Railwaymen, and it is about the role of railway workers during the Union Carbide disaster in Bhopal in central India in the mid-'80s. And those factory owners didn't really give a shit about anything, actually. The big part of the reason that the entire city of Bhopal got gassed with hydrogen cyanide from their disastrous, decrepit fucking factory was that the factory was in the red because nobody in India was buying the pesticides, and so the company didn't want to invest in it, because the only thing that any of these motherfuckers, like whether it's a banker, whether it's a factory owner, or any kind of capitalist, that what matters to them is profit. That's what that's what pays for their lifestyle. That's where their survival is coming from. This attempting to try to create an inherent moral distinction between someone who exploits factory workers and somebody who lends money, as if those two things that did not merge very often, is just dodgy as hell. Doug Henwood, who I have many disagreements with, who has also said some very wise things, said you should always be suspicious of a critique of finance that isn't a critique of capital, because there's always just seriously dodgy shit lying that way. If you give me a second, I will even find the link for that. Dog. Here we go. I'm just gonna drop the link from the article where he makes that where that quote comes from, because it was quite good. It was from during Occupy, when a lot of dodgy and the Fed types started using that as just their springboard to relevance.
And with imperialism and the rise of finance capital, we saw a dominance and the emergence of international cartels, huge multinational corporations going across the world. And
here's the other reason it's bullshit, and this is something that Henwood points out in this article, that no matter how abstracted financial activity is from production, at some point production's always in there. Because these people, these bankers are investing, and they're investing in production. So they are factory owners, at least part factory owners. So part of their money is coming from the making and selling of stuff and the surplus labor that they are extracting from the workforce. So this idea that you can neatly divide these things and then try to pile moral distinctions onto it as well is just complete fascist nonsense.
Spheres of influence. Kind of the opium wars in China, where they forced China to accept the importation of narcotics, forced them to accept products from Britain, not allow any tariffs, beat down the economy. The USA seized the Philippines, right? We know about the Spanish-American War, but not much is written about the Philippine-American War, which was hundreds
Mark Twain wrote a fair bit about it.
Thousands of people killed in the Philippines, forcing the Philippines to be a captive market. And what's different between imperialism and industrialization is during industrialization, that was the capitalists trying to raise the living standards in their home country.
No, they weren't. They weren't trying to raise the living standards in their home country. They were trying to raise the living standards in their home. This idea that capitalists were trying to raise the living standards for everybody, like talk to the workers in the industrial period. In fact, you can actually read a lot of them in the early period of industrialization, because a lot of them would disagree very strongly with the idea that their living standards improved. A lot of them actually wrote in great detail about how their living standards were much better before industrialization, when they were working as independent artisans.
As production, but imperialism was the emergence of huge multinational cartels that were actively trying to stop development in the third world.
You can find examples of this very early on in the period of industrialization as well. One example that he just since he mentioned the British Empire, is like literally just India. Literally, like what the British Empire did in India, first under the Company Raj, then under the British Crown directly, was to de-develop India and turn them into a captive market and source of raw materials. What he's trying to do here is treat imperialism as if it were completely separate from capitalism, like the underlying dynamic isn't fundamentally the same. So I'm beginning to think that if he has a plan to defeat imperialism, it's probably not a great one, because I get the impression that if he does know what it is, then he's not going to share it with the rest of the class.
Keep these countries poor, captive.
Yet how can we talk of social wealth when the production of that wealth can be attained only at the expense of human lives? Emma Goldman, yeah, very good quote. And very true. The factory, when you look at these factory owners, the living standards of the people working in their factories was not improving. In fact, fucking Caleb himself has pointed this out, that actually when he's like quoting Friedrich Engels on the anarchy in production and all of that, and he has observed that actually the whole dynamic of profit generation and surplus value necessarily means that you're going to create, that workers are creating something that they're not going to be able to afford on what they're being paid, which is not going to improve their living standards, and in fact, on the whole, is going to cause crises, because it's going to hit an impasse occasionally. I mean, so he is just selling any old kind of snake oil.
Markets, make them dependent on international corporations. For example, when the British went to India, they very famously burned down all the textile mills. India had a huge textile.
Not before copying the design and taking it back to Britain, because the textile mills in India were way more advanced than anything Britain had seen. They were churning out much better quality.
Aluminum apparatus, they burned it all down and forced them to import their cloth from Britain. Right? That's imperialism. And
yeah, but see, and this is where the idea that it is entirely a separate stage in capitalism kind of already starts to have to be called into question a little bit. Because we're talking, actually, that was going on very early on in British industrialization.
Time of imperialism, we saw the standard of living in the first world increasing at the expense of beating down any industrialization in the third world. And in the first world, you had...
And then what's great about this is that when he will talk about his prescriptions for the U.S., he very specifically is just talking about like social democracy in the U.S. without actually taking into account whether it is or is not at the expense of the rest of the working class and the rest of the world.
What you call the labor aristocracy. And these were workers that were working class people, worked in a factory, worked in manufacturing, but they were well paid enough that they...
Skipping ahead.
Trotskyites, Mensheviks, social revolutionaries. Others were sons, daughters, wives, husbands, mothers, fathers. Some were just those who came to the police to ask what had happened to their relatives.
All right. Really shouldn't be surprised by that, because everywhere we've seen British Empire economics put into practice, that has been the result.
Like,
in fact,
he couldn't at least have adjusted the crop on this so that we could see who the hell he's debating, and maybe a little bit more of Caleb himself than his nose.
Communism, fascism, neither of those ideologies would have arisen if it weren't for the dramatic failure of Adam Smith free trade economics around the world.
Define failure, though. People often... one of the things that always really I find very irritating personally is when people talk about something that has failed without considering its purpose in the first place. Like, there was an outcome that was bad for a lot of people, and therefore it's a failure. But the question is not whether there was an outcome that was bad for a lot of people. The question is whether it achieved its purpose. And the purpose was not necessarily to have an outcome that was good for a whole lot of people.
I mean, if you can go all across the planet, when countries are economically demolished, when they're basically forced to surrender, when big corporations like the Dutch East India Company back in the 1800s, or I guess more recently British Petroleum, which was one of the corporations that was looting Russia, when they get control and economically demolish countries, when they strip the government and push the government...
Get out of it because you do not have enough money to pay for her health care. I don't know about you folks, but it is Washington that has imposed that on me. It is Washington that has imposed that on American families for decades.
Oh, guy, you're making me dizzy with this camera work. Maybe this is part of the plan to defeat imperialism. We're 2 hours into this video. I haven't heard the plan yet, but there are 7 hours, 20 minutes, and 1 second left to go.
No, our enemies are not in Tehran. Our enemies are not in Beijing. Our enemies are not in Moscow.
Oh, that fucking placard, that fucking banner where they claim that Trump played a role in supporting the peaceful reunification of Korea. I mean, that is just such impressive bullshit.
Gathering organized by the Libertarian Party and the People's Party was extremely important, and we were very proud that we stepped up to become official sponsors of the event. On October 2nd, we launched our Peace MAGA operation.
Peace MAGA operation. Wow, I mean, and you can tell how influential it was. You can tell how influential it was. Just, I mean, like, just look at the Arab-Iranian region right now, and you will see how effective, how influential Peace MAGA was.
Off at Trump Tower. For the final month of the election, CPI members...
Yeah, the operation was them, like, creating this weird headcanon where Trump actually wanted peace or gave a shit about anything.
Large banner of Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un shaking hands, along with the words, "Only peace can make America great again."
They call this an operation. They're standing with a fucking banner. They're standing on a footpath on 5th Avenue in New York City with a banner.
We took to the streets of New York City, loudly promoting this message, highlighting hopes for peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula.
Wow, I mean, I'm surprised that Korea is not reunited already.
And amplifying the best parts of Trump's message.
Which are?
October 12th, CPI held an all-day workshop in Chicago. The event was attended by 25 people and included strategic discussions for the fight ahead.
Like how to do the raised fist gesture, which a lot of these people clearly need some strategic discussion on. I think Caleb is attempting a jumping jack here.
October 27th, CPI's Peace MAGA operation attended Trump's rally at Madison Square Garden.
Wow. Wow. My heroes. Like, this is part of the plan to defeat imperialism.
We engaged thousands of Trump supporters outside of the event, and our banner was even noticed by the New Yorker.
I mean, wow, their banner was noticed by the New Yorker. Let me see the
event, and our banner was even noticed by the New.
The Trump show comes to Madison Square Garden. Hulk Hogan, Rudy Giuliani, YMCA, and a thrum of American nativism. Wow, yes.
New Yorker that highlighted Peace MAGA.
Yeah, wow. Caleb Maupin's name is in print in the New Yorker. Clearly, a new world is dawning. Caleb Maupin said into a bullhorn, Kamala Harris is a product of George... okay, I need to move the chat projection window so I can see that. George Soros and the U.S. regime change apparatus. He was standing in front of a banner that read, "Only peace can make America great again." I'm surprised that world peace hasn't already happened with such a...
in their coverage. On October 30th, CPI member Penny Arcos confronted U.S. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar.
We would like to know as American people why you continue to support sending billions of taxpayer dollars to Nazis in Ukraine to start a nuclear war with Russia. China is not our enemy. China is not our enemy. Russia is not our enemy. We know.
Wow, I'm... It's like... I don't think that's not that's actually a bad question to ask, and yet, like, if this is what they call an operation, it sounds like just a few random things that are mostly publicity stunts.
More money for rich men's wars. No more money for rich men's wars. No more money for rich men's wars!
On November 2nd, the Center for Political Innovation participated in the Black is Back March in Washington, D.C. to support the Uhuru movement.
Another cult backed by and largely profited from by white millionaires.
November 23rd, the Center for Political Innovation released our letter to President-elect Donald Trump.
Wow, they released their letter. Well, I remember where I was when they released their letter to Donald Trump.
Urging him to become a peace president.
Wow. So they asked him to be a peace president. Well, I mean, and just look at the world right now and how peaceful it is. Obviously, Donald Trump wanted to make, I guess the letter was in the form of Peter Coffin?
Stands against the war makers and the emerging low-wage police state.
What do you mean emerging? What the fuck is this emerging shit? We haven't had a minimum wage increase in going on for 20 years. The cost of living has more or less doubled since the century began, and there are cops everywhere. I mean, the police state was here in the late 90s. I mean, in fact, if you weren't around to see it, I mean, one good book on the subject is Christian Perendi's Lockdown America. He seems to have had some very shitty takes more recently, but it was a good book, actually. Very worth reading. I mean, the idea that the police state is something that isn't there yet?
The video has been viewed by hundreds of thousands of people across various platforms. December 6th.
Wow. Is that what caused that bridge to fall? Like, what the hell is that doing in there?
16th, CBI attended the sentencing hearing of the Uhuru 3 in Tampa's federal court. We were overjoyed that after being acquitted of the main charge of acting as foreign agents, the Uhuru defendants did not receive...
I mean, and let me just say, like, I am glad that they were acquitted of that, because the charge was absolutely... I mean, that was an attempt to really push the boundaries of, like, First Amendment protected speech in the U.S. Because their entire case for them supposedly acting as foreign agents is that they engaged in propaganda activities that were consistent with things that Russia was also saying. Well, the thing is, if you're going to be a critic of U.S. imperial policy, you are inherently going to coincide with what U.S. imperial rivals say about it, at least some of the time. So, like, it is unambiguously good that charge was... that charge failed.
Any jail time or fines. They expect to overturn their conviction on appeal soon. Needless to say, this has been a big year for the Center for Political Innovation. We exposed Kamala Harris for what she truly is, a sadistic narcissist.
Wait, yeah, they exposed her. Muy buenas noches, jejeembe. They exposed her. See, I didn't realize that was a secret. I thought that was kind of her brand.
It would have been very dangerous if she ever entered the Oval Office. In addition to that, we amplified the pro-peace aspects of Trump's message.
No, they didn't. I mean, we actually on stream watched that Operation Peace MAGA or whatever the fuck he called it. And all it was them repeating, only peace will make America great again. Like, the whole thing was just them creating this weird-ass headcanon where Trump was somehow pro-peace and not putting it on Wattpad, acting it out on Fifth Avenue.
Furthermore, we raised the Uhuru 3 case as loudly as we could, not only in the United States, but at the United Nations and in Russia. We won so many victories.
Like, and what's the point of raising it in Russia, though? Like, Russia isn't the one prosecuting the case. The jury is not coming from Russia.
This year, because through our relentless work, we are giving voice to what the overwhelming majority of the American people want.
The overwhelming majority of the American people have never heard of Uhuru. They have, and I will say, fortunately, in every sense of the word, also never heard of Caleb.
Economic justice, freedom, and an end to the wars. Our organization possesses a clear understanding of what stands in the way. That is the system of globalism imperialism. And with our
globalism imperialism, see, he does that. To my knowledge, he first explicitly did that in his book that was just a Twitter thread called BreadTube Serves Imperialism, which he managed to finish without giving a single example of anyone who is definitely BreadTube doing anything that could definitely be said to be serving imperialism, even though there are certainly critiques to be made on that score. And he decided to just sort of say, oh, well, I'm going to treat globalism, you know, the Nazi slang term for those three bracket type people, and imperialism as if they were the exact same thing. And now he just always just puts a slash in between them.
Clear understanding, we can lead the fight. This year has been a year.
You can't even get clear video. What are you talking about, clear understanding?
Very significant changes in our organization. We liquidated the nonprofit for legal reasons.
Which nonprofit, though? Because they had to, wait a second. Last I heard, CPI in both of its iterations, in New York and in Oregon, was a for-profit corporation. I'm interested in what legal reasons they liquidated the nonprofit for and where the money went. Caleb.
Now incorporated as an LLC in the U.S. state of Texas.
Wait, so now, okay, wait a second. That's three different places. They've been incorporated in three different states in not even as many years. Because their first incorporation was in New York, in Brooklyn, and then, you know, after the whole, all the whistleblowers came forward, they, CPI Mark II was incorporated in Oregon, and now they're incorporated in Texas? Wow, it's Caleb Maupin reading Caleb Maupin. I bet he's learning all sorts of insightful things.
Made the decisive choice to break with leftover Cold War ideology and clarify that our view, known as innovationism, represents an entirely new stage. Additionally, we have begun defining ourselves
an entirely new stage, which is another way of saying they got sick of having people dunk on them by pointing out that despite pretending to be communists, they definitely weren't, and decided to call themselves something completely different.
In opposition to the toxic trend called fandom.
Yeah, I can see Peter Coffin has decided that they find having fans toxic. That's why they're doing this. But I'm really glad that the CPI apparently has decided that the way to defeat imperialism is apparently through fandom.
Which traps people in a negative cycle of social media cynicism rather than building the communities of solidarity.
Wait, okay, they've got an audience right there. Why are they facing away from the people sitting right in front of them? There's an eraser on that dry erase board, but no markers.
And networks of resistance that are urgently needed. So, what's next? Well, we're headed to Washington, D.C. for Donald Trump's inauguration. Not to join the protesters.
Note, this video it was not made at that time. This video is a compilation of random shit that he has already published on YouTube elsewhere, totaling 9 hours, 20 minutes, and 31 seconds. We're not looking at old material that is... Wait, there's more fucking Scott Ritter? Is it, or is that... Wait a second, is this going to be the same?
This was that the alarm went off. You didn't have 30 to 40 minutes, you had 5 minutes. Which means, fire now, boom, and we're all dead. We're all dead. Now, I don't like to say this too often, but I appreciate...
I think this is the exact same video that he was clipping from earlier.
Shaking my hand coming up here. Don't shake my hand for anything I am doing today or tomorrow. Shake my hand for what I did in 1988, 1989, 1990.
I mean, yeah, I agree. Don't shake his hand for the stuff he's done since. Like, I mean, wow, so you're a Scott Ritter fan? Name 3 of the charges he was convicted on.
Wanna know why?
Well, I know why. I know why you shouldn't shake his hand for the stuff he's been known for more recently. You gonna tell us, Scott?
Because if it wasn't for people like me on the American side and my Soviet counterparts, none of us would be here today.
Okay, wait a second. There are actual examples where there are specific people, and in relatively small number, who can say that but for their actions during particularly critical moments in the so-called Cold War, probably nobody would be here today. Nothing Scott Ritter was not personally involved in any of them. In fact, in both cases, it was in fact either, I mean, in one case it was a Soviet Navy captain in 1961, and then it was an East German spy attached to the NATO command in Brussels in 1983. Like, the 2 times that it really looked close, it was actually the Soviet side backing down and calming shit down and de-escalating the situation that put an end to the problem.
Because without the treaty, there would have been a mistake. And if that mistake, we wouldn't have had time. Decisions would have been made. I'll give you an example from life. June 1995.
I mean, not that he's big noting himself. He just gave himself credit for, what was that, the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty? Scott Ritter actually looks like the main character, like a live-action version of the main character in Family Guy.
That's what you want to argue about.
Allegations, these are very well documented, and these are even relying upon Soviet figures. You can't say, well, the Soviet figures are totally valid for GDP, but they're not valid for the murder mills of the gulags.
Okay, and I just noticed the time. It is time to wrap up. And thank you very much for joining in. I hope you enjoyed the stream. Even 3 hours, 17 minutes, and 39 seconds into this 9 hour, 20 minute, and 31 second video, we're still none the wiser about the plan that Caleb definitely does have to defeat imperialism. But it is time for me to leave you for tonight. I will be back tomorrow night at 11:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, and I look forward to seeing you then. Have a good night, and fuck this guy.